Um, Today is a new day, and we'll be starting off with a fresh console application file. And the way we can do that is when you open your Visual Studio, you should see when you open your Visual Studio 2026. This is what you should see. So you should just come over to this place, create a new project, like we did last week. Create a console app, then bottom right, next, then name the project intro C sharp in part two for part two, right? Impute this name. So since we're doing the continuation from last week, so I just named it intro C sharp part two, like in Roman numerals. You can name it whatever you want, but to just follow along with what I've done, you can just use what I did. And location, choose anywhere you want in your machine. Bottom right, next, then create. On today, we'll be talking about some C sharp math class methods that allows us to perform mathematical tasks on numbers. And for us to do that, let's just delete this. And we have, so let's declare two variables: int first number equals to int second number equals to C5. So C sharp has a couple of methods that we can use to check this boot number, which of them is larger or bigger. So for us to do that, all we just need to do is say var result equals to math dot max first number or number. And we just need to do is cw space. For those of you just joining us for the first time, what I just did is a shortcut to write also the right line. What you're going to do is press CW then tab to give you that completion. Then write the larger number between the two number is results. Then when you run this code, larger number between the two numbers is 10, obviously, because we know 10 is greater than 5. So likewise, since we have the max number, we also have the mean. So to check the minimum number amongst two numbers or between two numbers, so we can just duplicate this line, result mean, and change this method from the class, from the math class to mean. Then we all know what is going to happen. Then the lesser number between the two numbers is change this to result mean. Then run the code. Obviously, that's it. Then beyond these two functions, right? There's also a square root method that exists in the math class. So for us to get, say for example, square root number equals its one, then var square number equals to math dot square. Exactly. Save this and you can just also log this. The of square root of this number is square number. And if we run this, as you can see, the square root of it one is 9. There is also the round method. Basically, what it just does is it rounds a number to the nearest whole number. And how do we do that is, say for example, we have this number, round number equals to 9.32. CW, nope, the round number is math.round. Then for this, what we should get in the output should be 9. Because from mathematics, you know that when we're trying to round a number, it rounds to the nearest integer, the nearest whole number. So if you do this, we should get 9 as the output, obviously 9. So now let's talk about string methods, right? Last week we did a little bit of, how to data types, and we touched on strings a little bit. So now let's go deeper into what the methods that exist in when you initialize a variable as a string. So for example, let's say we initialize or we declare and initialize this variable string greeting equals to Good. So there are some methods that exist for in strings, right? And some methods that exist are, let's say, length. If we're trying to get the length of this string that we did here. So if I console.log this and we say the length of the greeting is, you can come here and see greeting dot length. And what this is going to print out is, if we can count this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's what is expected to be the output. The length of greeting is 12, right? Also, beyond the length method, there is also a method such as to upper and to lower. To upper and to lower methods. And one of the ways to do that is if we come down here and print this out. I see the uppercase value of greeting is, you can come down here and see greeting dot to upper for the method. And if you run it, we should get everything in uppercase rather than in lowercase. As you can see, oh sorry, I mean it still works. If you just remove this, and why I'm making this mistake is because in JavaScript ecosystem or TypeScript, if we are trying to like use the value, we append the dollar sign right before the curly braces, not before the quotes. That's why I keep making this mistake. If you've noticed in our last video too, I also made that mistake. But anyways, same thing too. Likewise, if we're trying to do the lowercase for all lowercase, you can say to lower and run this. We should get everything in lowercase. As you can see, this is it. Let me just change this to the lowercase value. Then we can also access, let's say for example, right, we're trying to access the first letter of this string. Here's how we can do it. Let me just come here, accessing strings. We can see var first letter of greeting equals to greeting. And the way to access string is, there are a couple of ways, but here's one way you can do that. We just open square brackets, and as you can see, it already suggested string index int index. All we just need to pass in a number. So what this, the way it works is like, numbers in programming starts from 0, right? We don't start from 1. So for us to get the initial or the first letter in this string, we have to put 0, and that's just because in programming number starts from 0. And if we were to print this out, CW, the first letter of greeting is first letter. If we were to print it out, we get the uppercase of G, as you can see. Exactly. And do note, you know that we try to access the length of the greeting, and we give it was 12, right? However, if you are trying to access the last letter in the string, you have to minus it by 1, because like I said, numbers starts from 0. So it goes from 0 through to 11. So if I were to say the last letter of greeting equals greeting 11, that's because, okay, we know that that is the last index of the number. If we were to come down here and print it over here, the last letter of greeting, last letter of greeting, as you can see, G. We know that the first letter is letter G, and the last letter is small letter G. Moving on, there's also a technique that we can use to like retrieve the last letter, rather than having to like have it at the top of your head, the length of the string. Let's say for example, you don't know the length of the string and you just want to get the last letter, and that is much more advisable for you to do. Here's how we can do it. The last letter equals to greeting, and we can see the greeting. The idea just suggested it, how we can go about it. Greeting the length minus 1. So what this just means is, okay, get me the length of the string and minus it by 1. So that way, automatically, what this just does is it's going to give you the last letter. So if we were to come here and say, okay, let's switch it up to S. Let's add good mornings, right? And if we were to print this out, last letter is last letter, we should get S as opposed to G. This is just much more a robust way or an advisable way to go about accessing the last character in a string. Next up, we'll be talking about conditionals, and what conditional just means is how do we execute a certain block of code when a certain condition is true or either false. And let us just jump straight into the demonstration. And before we demonstrate that, let me just comment out all this line of code. And the way for you to do is just highlight the lines of code you want to comment and press Ctrl//. Get that. So now let me just bring these two variables that I declared and initialized. I put them here. So now, say for example, we're trying to say if the first number is greater than the second number, print out this in the console. So for us to do that is how to write that. We just say if first number is greater than second number, CW. We can just say, just come down here and say first number is greater than second number. And you see, if you run this code, our output, we should get 10 is greater than 5. That's because this condition is true. So if 10 is greater than 5, this line of code, line 52, is going to run. So now if you just press Ctrl F5 or we run the code, yeah, as you can see, 10 is greater than 5. Likewise, we also have the else condition. So what else just means is if an if clause doesn't work out, the next thing that is going to execute is the else block of code. So if you say 10, if 10 is not greater than second, it is this line of code that is going to run. So here's how we can just do that. We can just say first, we can just say first number is not greater than second number. So let me just change this to 2. So that way, this block of code is going to fail and we have this output in our console. So if you run this code, you get 2 is not greater than 5. So beyond the if and else, there's also an in-between condition, right? Which is the else if condition. So what that does is it checks the if block of code. If that is true, it's going to run. However, if it is false, the next block of code that's going to run is the else if. So if I come here and say else if first number equals to second number, and just come down here and say consider the right line, first number is equal to second number. So for us to make this work right, since the condition I'm checking is the first number equals to second number, I mean, if you are confused as what these operators mean, I'm going to append in the video the first video in this series in the playlist, so that way you can go back and watch. However, moving on, for us to make this block of code work, we need to make sure that the first number equals to the second number. So right now, if you change this line 46 to 5, so here's what's going to happen. The code is going to run as such. It's to check if 5 is greater than 5. We know that that's not true. And it's now come to this next line of code. So from 53 to 56, it's not going to check, okay, is 5 equals to 5? That's true. So if the condition evaluates to true, this line of code is going to run. So now if we run this code, we should get 5 is equals to 5. Now if we run it, exactly 5 is equals to 5. Under conditions, they are the if, else, and else if. There is also the switch statement, right? So rather than having to write these blocks of code, there's also another way for us to confirm or for us to like execute a certain portion of the code if a value evaluates to either true or false. So to demonstrate, let us do this. Let's say int day equals to 4. We can come down and say switch day and write this and see. Here's how we write switch statement. We can say case 1 and come down below and say consider the right line. Let me just write the code and I will explain after I've written the whole code. Now the way the switch expression works is this switch expression is evaluated once and the value of the expression is compared with the values of each case. If there is a match, the associated block of code is then executed. So what that just means is right now we are trying to like compare, right, which case. So right now our day is 4. So the block of or the line of code that is going to run is this line because it matches this case. So case 4. Right now let us just run this code and we should see that we will get Thursday printed out. So if I were to change this to 1 and save this and run, we should get Monday. Exactly as you can see. That's just the way switch works. And beyond writing this, there's also a default case, or let's say a default scenario that we can include in our switch expression. So we can just come here. Let's say we have tested for every permutation, right? And we just want a generic scenario whereby if any of this expression doesn't match or if any of these cases don't match, run this line of code. So we can just come here, and the way to do that, we can just come here and say default put a colon. We can just come here and say, let me just complete this. You can just come here and say the doesn't match any case. So if we were to change this, we know, okay, the conditions that we included was 1 through to 7. So if we were to come here and change the variable to 10, the line of code that is going to get executed is this 90, which is the day doesn't match any case. So if we were to run this, here's what we are going to get in the output. Here is the day doesn't match any case. Our next topic we are going to be looking into is loops, and loops is just a way for us to like run a certain block of code a certain number of times. And the way there are about 4 different types of loop. There is the while loop, there is the do while loop, there is the for loop, and there is the for each loop. So let me just write this. There is the while loop, do while loop, there is the for loop, and there is the for each loop. So we'll talk about the while loop first, followed by the do while loop, for, and the for each. So we'll be talking about the while loop. And the while loop, the way it works is it loops through a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. And to demonstrate that, let's say we're trying to print out 1 through to 100 in our terminal, right? Obviously, we can't just start writing consider right line 1, consider right line 2 all through to 100. And one of the simplest way we can do that is using the while loop. So here's how we can do this. We can just say int start equals to 1, and we can just come down here and say while then the expression that we want to evaluate to true, and we can just come here and see while start is less than or equals to 100, and say okay, what do we want to do? We want to consider right line the start value, or okay, let me just change this variable to number to make more sense, right? Let's just say int number, change it and consider right. And other thing to note is that for our system not to keep on running or to just make sure our while loop ends, we have to increase the value. So what we just need to do is like I taught last week, and just the syntactic sugar of increasing the number where I want. You can just come here and see number plus plus. We can also do it this way. If I comment out this line, you can also come here and see number plus equals 1. However, in most conventions that you see when using while loop is this line of code. So let's just use this, and I'm just going to leave this as a reference. So now all what we will see in our screen is 1 through to 100, right? And if I were to run this line of code, or if I were to run this is what we're going to get. As you can see, 1 to 100. Yeah, so that's a technique for you to like, if you're trying to like print out something multiple times or wherever. Or we can just come here and say, okay, instead of having to like print number, we can just say, okay, this is going to be printed out 100 times. And if we were to run it, we'll see that we get that output 100 times. We also have the do while loop. And the major difference between a do while loop and a while loop is that a do while loop is always going to be executed at least once. We can write a while loop such that it's not going to be printed out. And for me to demonstrate that, let me write for this same code that we did above here from line 95 to line 102. Let me try and do this. Let me write, so you see the difference between a while loop and a do while. Do CW, this is going to print it out while number less than 100. So if we were to run this, let me just comment this out first. If we were to run it, we are still going to get the same output as what we did above here. And first of all, before I forget, we have to increase the number by 1. Yep. So if you run it, exactly the same 100 times. However, here's the major difference, right? If I were to change this to, let me just say number 101. We know that 101 is not less than or equals to 100. Naturally, if it was just a while loop, this line of code is not going to be printed. But because it's a do while loop, it is just going to run once, and we're just going to get this output once. And if we were to run it, you'll see, right? We're going to get this once. So now let me now show you. Okay, let me just comment this line of code and let me run this. So if I were to run this, we're never going to get this line of code printed out at all, because obviously this condition has to evaluate into true before this block of code is going to run. So we obviously know 101 is not less than or equals to 100. So if we were to run it, we won't get anything. As you can see, it's not going to be printed out. Yep, that's like the major difference between a while loop and a do while loop. Last but not the least, we'll be working on a for loop, and basically the loops that we've talked about, which are the while loop and the do while loop, they practically work the same way. They're just different ways to loop through a block of code or run a block of code. So the way a for loop is written is, here's how we write a for loop. We write for and open a parenthesis. Then there are going to be 3 statements that are going to be included inside these parentheses. And how do we write that is, we have to declare and initialize a variable. And conventionally, the way we do that is int I equals to 0. I mean, the IDE already made a suggestion. And let's just press tab to complete it, because that's what I was going to write. So let me just complete this line of code and just say, okay, print out hi. So now the way the for loop works is, it takes if the first statement is separated by semicolon. So what this first statement just does is, okay, where are we starting from? And the next statement is, okay, how many times are we going to run it? And the last statement is just the incremental value. And if we were to run this code, right, what we're going to get in the output is 0 through to 9, because obviously we're starting with 0. But let me just start with, let's run this. So you see we get 0 through to 9. Then let me just start with 1, because I'm getting somewhere. So we have to start with 1 and run this, and I want to print out 10. You just have to change the operators. That means you're saying I less than or equals to 10. So to run this code, we will now get 1 through to 10. And as you can see, we got 1 through to 10.